Hello, everybody. Welcome to the California Chronicles Trivia Night. I hope you guys are excited to learn a little bit more about Cal history, spirit, and traditions, and of course, our wonderful card stunts. So, hello, my name is Mark Maffeo. I'm a second year applied math student from Clovis, California, and I am the director of traditions for the UC Rally Committee for this school year. And my favorite rally committee memory has to be seeing Cal win at the big game and storming the field at Stanford Stadium. As a lifelong Cal fan myself, this was definitely one of the most memorable experiences of my entire life, not just my time as a Cal student.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Regalado, and I'm one of the directors of stunts. I'm a fourth year, class of 2021, so I'm graduating next semester. My hometown is San Miguel de Allende, Guanajuato, Mexico, and I'm majoring in molecular environmental biology. And I have to say, my favorite RallyCon memory has to be being part of Cannon Crew. And because I was being trusted with confidential information, and I got to shot the California Victory Cannon twice, which I think is such a cool thing to be part of. Fun fact, the picture you see right there was the first card stunt I was able to be part of and construct at the Memorial Stadium, as well as having my former Eric right there, my branch leader, Christina, and two of Mark's formers, Aiden and Hannah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paulina Nguyen. I'm the co-director of stunts along with Melissa. I'm a second year, and I am studying political science and music. I'm originally from Vista, California, and my favorite RallyCon memory is definitely seeing Cal's big game victory last year in 2019 and being able to see the acts afterwards. That picture is me and my roommate, best friend, and director of security this year, Bridget, after the big game. We're very excited for everyone to join us tonight, and we can't wait to get started.
So for tonight's itinerary, we will be having three trivia rounds. So that's really exciting. So we'll be having a fun fact trivia, a history trivia, and a card stunts trivia. And in between those three trivias, we will be having two history presentations. The first one will be the UC Berkeley Traditions presentation, and the second one will be the card stunts at Cal presentation.
Going to just hop into the Cal Fun Facts trivia. So the first question is, which famous Hollywood And that would be Chris Pine, who graduated with a BA in English in 2002. Second question. Which two answers are UC Berkeley tradition meant to enhance students' grades? And we do have some Cal historians in the audience. So yes, rolling down the hill on Faculty Glade and not stepping on the seal surrounding Memorial Glade are ways that we use to preserve our grades. Superstitions, of course, but I perceive them as true. Then our next question, Samuel Kresge, from where the Kresge Engineering Library gets its name, founded what retail chain? Yes, it is Kmart. He actually founded the SS Kresge Company, and that was eventually shortened to Kmart. And up until 2014, UC Berkeley used to have the only captive colony of what animal? Would be the spotted hyena. Fun fact, back in the 1990s when they were making The Lion King, the animators from Disney actually came up to UC Berkeley to draw the hyenas for the movie. It looks like Corey is still holding strong at the top spot. It is the Bancroft Library houses the Wimmer Golden Nugget, and it is on permanent exhibition there until this day. And which fictional character did not end up attending UC Berkeley? Unfortunately, although UC Berkeley has had a lot of fictional alumni in its day, Sheldon Cooper is not one of them. So congrats to those who answered that question correctly. So how many officially recognized bear images are there at UC Berkeley? So there are 27 officially recognized bear images on campus. Most of them are statues housed outside. However, there are a few murals that you go into the libraries and find as well. Then Cal alumni Julia Morgan designed what National Historic Landmark? And the correct answer is Hearst Castle, which you guys could visit in beautiful San Simeon, California. So which of these is not a decal at UC Berkeley? So unfortunately, we do not have a prehistoric creatures decal at Cal. However, at Cal, you could basically take a decal on anything, ranging from topics such as chocolate to Harry Potter to even Kanye West. So what building did John Galen Howard design first? That would be the Hearst Memorial Mining Building, was John Galen Howard's first project. And this was dedicated to George Hearst, who was a very successful miner at the time. So which popular review website was founded by Berkeley undergraduates? So this would be Rotten Tomatoes. It was founded by 3 UC Berkeley undergraduates who hoped it would be a fun way to review kung fu movies. Little did they know it would blow up as much as it did and become one of the most used review websites of current day. So, who did Cal play in their first ever football game? So, fun fact, Cal's first football game was not against an official college. It was against a club team from San Francisco known as the Marians. So, UC Berkeley hired the first African-American professor in UC history, and he taught what subject? So as you make it inferred from the picture, David Blackwell taught statistics starting in 1955, became head of the department in 1956, and even has the newest freshman dorm, Blackwell Hall, named after him. Another multi-select question. Which two UC Berkeley faculty just won the Nobel Prize? UC Berkeley really cleaned up at the Nobel Prizes this year, as we had faculty win for the Nobel Prize in Chemistry and for the Nobel Prize in Physics. And Jazz takes the lead. Couple last questions. So we had frat brothers known as the Phoenix Five stole what item in the Cal-Stanford rivalry? Yes, the Phoenix Five stole the Stanford tree costume, and it was recently rated as the best mascot theft in the history of college sports by Sports Illustrated and Bleacher Report. The last question, the meme page of UC Berkeley is the first and most popular of its kind. How many members does it have? Has 198,000 members, despite it only starting in 2016. And even most of the members aren't even Berkeley undergraduates, as UC Berkeley has only 40,000 undergraduates. And congratulations to Steve, Jazz, and Corey. So please be sure to screenshot the screen In order to claim your prize, which we will tell y'all how to do at the end of the hour. And congratulations to you three again. I hope you guys enjoyed that first round of trivia. These are definitely some interesting facts that I didn't even know prior to this week about UC Berkeley. So now I'll just give you all a brief 15-minute overview about the traditions surrounding our beloved university. So the first tradition that I'm going to talk about is the origin of these schools' colors, which are blue and gold. So the official school colors were chosen by Rebecca Bragg, class of 1876. And the story of how these colors were chosen goes as follows. So during the time, a bunch of the male students were arguing about which color should be the symbol of UC Berkeley. And there were valid arguments on both sides. So there were those who were a proponent of just choosing blue to be the main color. You could see it was influenced by seeing the San Francisco Bay from Berkeley's campus, the student cadet uniforms that used to be worn, and the fact that the founders of UC Berkeley had been Yale graduates and they wanted to take influence from Yale in, I guess, molding the character of their university. However, there were those who were proponents of gold. So California is the Golden State and got famous off of the gold rush. The California golden poppy is the state's official flower. And you could even see the Golden Gate Bridge when standing next to the Campanile. So as I said before, there were valid arguments on both sides. So what Miss Bragg did is she said something along the lines of, why not both? And that is exactly what the university did. And that is why blue and gold has become UC Berkeley's official school colors. And that brings us to the main symbol of UC Berkeley, which is the Golden Bear. So the story of the Golden Bear dates back to spring of 1895, where the UC track team competed in the Western Intercollegiate Meet in Chicago. Because of this, they were the first Cal athletes to compete outside of the state, and they really weren't expected to do much because they were competing against the athletic powerhouses of the day, such as Harvard, Yale, and many of the other Ivy League schools. In fact, the UC Berkeley was so young that they didn't even have a mascot yet, but they carried 2 banners depicting a grizzly bear in gold, the grizzly bear being chosen because it was a symbol of the Bear Flag Revolt, which is a major event in California's state history. So even though UC Berkeley wasn't expected to do much of that track meet, surprisingly, the Cal track team swept the competition and took first place, much to the surprise of almost everybody involved. In fact, the Eastern newspapers at the time thought that the banners that UC Berkeley brought with them actually jinxed the performance of the other teams and made them not perform as well. So, as you all may infer, this was a huge victory in the history of the university, and it was a large and a huge event for Cal athletics. So when the athletes came back from Chicago, there was a huge mob of students and faculty there to greet them and congratulate them on their victory. And one of these attendees was Professor Charles Mills Gailey, who took inspiration from the event and the banners that the team had used to pen Cal's first fight song, which is the Golden Bear. And here is one of the banners that the track team used. It's actually housed in a vault somewhere on campus till this day. And that brings us to our favorite Golden Bear, our mascot, Oski. So a brief history of Oski. So the name of Oski comes from the Oski Yell, which was a cheer created by Cal students to mock the Latin-inspired cheers of the Ivy League schools back in the early 1900s. So the Oski Yell was created in 1900, and it could have been heard at any Cal athletic event during that time period. However, Oski as we know him today wasn't created until 1941. Actually, before then, UC Berkeley used live bear cubs to be the symbol of the university on the sides of football games. However, that tradition of live bear cubs was stopped due to safety issues, as during one of the incidents, a bear cub actually took a swing at one of its handlers, and the university shut that down immediately. So in return, we got our lovable mascot Oski, who debuted on September 22nd of 1941. The first man to don the Oski suit was a transfer student named William Rockwell. The story goes that he was a very shy and introverted individual before coming to Cal. But when he donned the Oski suit, the spirit of Oski and his loud and humorous nature really conveyed himself onto Rockwell. And after being Oski, William Rockwell became an extrovert for the rest of his life. So a couple main characteristics about Oski that you all may notice is his padded cardigan with two stripes symbolizing his status as a perpetual sophomore, not having the wisdom of an upperclassman, but definitely not being as clueless as a freshman. Another aspect that makes Oski unique is his anonymity. So the identity of Oski is not known by anybody on Cal's campus except for the Oski committee. And that is very unique compared to other college mascots, where many people actually know who the mascot is. And Oski just turned 79 years old this September. And that brings us to one of the another main tradition of UC Berkeley's campus, which is the Stanford Axe. So the origin of the Stanford Axe began on April 13th of 1899, where it debuted at a Stanford rally. And Stanford fans really got a kick out of having the axe. So as a result, 2 days later, they brought the axe to a best of 3 baseball series that they had with Cal and San Francisco. And they were using the axe to chop up pieces of blue and gold ribbon. So the Cal fans in attendance really didn't take to this gesture very much. So after upsetting the Cardinal in the best of 3 baseball series, they actually stole the axe from Stanford and attempted to get the axe back to Berkeley. And that led to a wild chase throughout the city involving Cal fans, Stanford fans, and the San Francisco police. And the axe changed hands multiple times on this route. It even got its handle chopped off. That's why we have the axe head as the trophy, not the full axe till this day. And to conclude this chase, the Cal men thought they were in the clear and thought they would easily be able to get the axe across the bay to UC Berkeley. However, they found out that the San Francisco police had actually beaten them to the ferry depot, and they were really looking for a way to get it across the bay. However, the presence of the police at the depot did not stop the innovation of the Cal fans. So one of the men who had the axe saw a female friend of his and asked if she could pose with him as a couple. And thankfully she agreed. So with her on his arm and the axe head tucked underneath its jacket, they were able to get on the ferry and cross into Berkeley without any question from police. And that led to the axe being in Cal's possession. And on April 17, 1899, the first axe rally was held on UC Berkeley's campus. But the axe did not only stay at Berkeley's possession for 30 years. So on April 3rd of 1930, 21 Stanford students, known to them as the Immortal 21, to us as the Immoral 21, successfully heisted the axe from Cal students at the Greek Theater. And this was an excessive plot, to say the least. It involved disguising themselves as rally committee students, 12 or so getaway cars, and tear gassing the entire audience at the Greek Theater. Especially due to the tear gas, both schools kind of saw that having the axe just be constantly stolen would kind of be a safety issue. So in 1933, both schools decided to designate the axe as the trophy to the winner of the big game. And the rally committee was designated as custodians of the axe when it is in Cal's possession. And that's not to say the axe has not been stolen many times since 1930. In fact, it's been stolen 7 times, with Cal stealing it 3 times and Stanford 4 times. However, I would not recommend stealing the axe nowadays, as it is now considered a felony to do so. So, since nobody could really steal the axe nowadays, the only way it could change hands is during the big game, which is the annual football game between Cal and Stanford, beginning in 1892, which makes it the oldest college football rivalry in the West. So, a couple facts about big game history. So, the first few games were played in San Francisco, as neither Cal nor Stanford had a stadium on their campus yet. However, when both campuses built stadiums, the big game is now held at Stanford on odd numbered years and at Cal in even numbered years. So some other quick facts is that Stanford won the first game 14-10 and leads the overall series 64-47-11. However, I only perceive the most recent big game as the one that matters, as Cal did take the axe back last year after not having it for almost a decade. So another cool tradition that happens at the big game is the stare down, where the custodians of the axe from each school, the UC Rally Committee from Cal, and the Stanford Axe Committee stare at each other for the last 2 minutes of the game. This is done to ensure that the axe changes hands, like it did last year when it went from Stanford's possession to Cal's. It changes hands right when the game ends, right on the field, and that makes it very unique compared to many of the other rivalries in the nation. And that brings us to Bonfire Rally, which started in Cal's early years, where students would start sporadic bonfires on campus. However, this became an extreme safety issue, and the university wanted to do something about it. So as a result, some students led by Alex Adler created the UC Rally Committee in 1901 to control this situation. However, they did still want to preserve the tradition of bonfire rallies. So now, during the big game week, Rallycom holds a bonfire rally in the Greek Theater to celebrate this tradition. And you guys can see some pictures of bonfire rallies on your screen right now. So here are some ones from the earlier years. And here are some from the later years. And starting last year, the Rally Committee did build this metal structure known as the Big Flame, meant to keep the bonfire tradition alive in a safer and more ecologically friendly way. So I got, I think, 2 more slides to talk about UC Berkeley traditions, the first of which involves the Big C. So soon after the founding of the university, the class rush tradition began, where freshmen would try to run up the hill where the Big C is today and try to paint their class initials. However, the sophomores did not want them to do this and ended up throwing the freshmen back down the hill. Given the fact that this hill is pretty steep, you all might infer that this is a very unsafe tradition. So in 1904, the rush was ended for safety reasons. However, this did not stop the innovation of Cal students. So a year later, the freshman class of 1908 and the sophomore class of 1907 united to construct a concrete C on the hillside, which you guys could see on your screen right now. So in the earlier years of the C, it would be the freshman's job to keep it painted gold and the sophomore's job to guard it. And those duties have since moved to duties of the Rally Committee. And my last tradition I'm going to talk about is the California Victory Cannon, which you guys may have known about already if you had ever attended a Cal football game before. So the origin of the Victory Cannon was that it was presented to Rallycom by the class of 1964 in time for the 1963 big game. And this was, it became a mainstay at Cal football games during the time period. So in 1970, the existence of the cannon was put in jeopardy as the PAC-8 banned cannons due to an incident that happened at Stanford where they almost actually impaled one of Washington's football players. However, the Rally Committee still wanted the cannon to be present at football games, so they pushed the cannon all the way up Charter Hill, which is close to the stadium, and built a makeshift platforms out of desks and other pieces of furniture that they could find. And it is because of this that the cannon is able to fire from the platform and is the reason that we have the only student-run canon in the nation. And that is all that I have about an overview of UC Berkeley traditions. Now we're going to turn it off to one of our directors of Sons, Paulina, to lead us in our second round of trivia.
And so this will be based off some of the history that you hopefully picked up on in this last presentation. So what day was the University of California officially established? So the answer is March 23rd, 1868. We did just celebrate 150 years of Cal 2 years ago, and this is also the day that we celebrate Charter Day every year. So our next question is asking you for some of the reasons why blue and gold were chosen as Cal's school colors. So the two answers that were correct was blue for Yale alums, since several of our founders were Yale alums, and gold was named after several things, the gold rush and California golden poppies that used to be on the Berkeley Hills. So our third question is, which Berkeley sport team first displayed the golden bear on their banner when they were competing in athletics? Yes, so the answer is our track and field team. So Oski is a perpetual what? What year is Oski? What year has he been since he was first came about and continues to be to this day? Yes, so Oski is a perpetual sophomore. We love our sophomores and we love Oski. After what major event did the Cal Band first adopt its signature high kick? So the Cal Band adopted its high kick after the 1950 Rose Bowl. Unfortunately, we did not win, but they did get to pick it up from the Big Ten, and it's something that they still use to this day. So what is the big game tradition that happens between the Rally Committee and the Axe Committee every year at the last 3 minutes of the big game? The tradition that we do is the stare down, and you could see a little bit of that happening in the picture on this slide. So another question with multiple answers. How many times has the Stanford Axe been stolen since 1933? That's my mistake. I'm sorry, I ended the question, but it has been stolen 4 times by Stanford and 3 times by Cal. So what year did the UC Rally Committee form to take control of student bonfires? The UC Rally Committee was formed in 1901. So true or false, Cal won the 1982 big game with a score of 24-20. That is true. They won the big game when the play happened, score 24-20. And just this past year, we actually had a similar score, winning 25-20 when we got the axe back. So what was the unique competition that brought about the Big C? And there's multiple answers to this question. So the answer was the rush, which Mark described in his history presentation. Here's a bonus question. What year was the Campanile built? We recently just celebrated a big anniversary of the Campanile a few years back. It was built in 1914. There are several reflection pools on campus, and one of them is Ludwig's Fountain, which is in Sproul. So who was it named after? So Ludwig's Fountain was named after one of our professor's dogs who used to play in the fountain. So what is the oldest spirit group on campus? It was the UC Rally Committee. How many libraries does UC Berkeley house? There are 24 official libraries on campus. The one you saw on the slide was our beautiful Doe Library. So our last question, how many elements of the periodic table have been discovered at Berkeley? The answer is 16. We have discovered 16 elements, which is more than any other college has ever discovered. So for our winners of the Cal History, we have Alyssa in 3rd place, Jazz in 2nd place, and Dog in 1st place. So make sure to take a picture and email it to us after this so that you can receive your prize.
Hello. So now I will be sharing my screen to start off our Cal stunts, card stunts at Cal presentation. Okay, so we will be presenting, both Paulina and I will be presenting this history presentation. And to start off, what is a card stunt? So a card stunt is an image, word, or phrase formed by multiple people holding up colored cards in coordination. So if you've been to our football games, you might have seen these happen. So here we have two standing stunts, which are just set up where they might not be picked up by people. This might be done for events that won't have crowds. But as you can see on the very right picture, that is one of our stunts being held up by our student section. So the first card stunt, this is very controversial, but we do hold the very first card stunt, although Stanford and USC might say otherwise. So Stanford created a similar effect with shirts and hats in 1907, and USC used cardboard to put up the word Trojan on the bleachers on 1922. But here in Berkeley, our students figured to put up cards on 1910, a rugby game with a big block C and the Stanford Axe. In 1914, the first big game card stunt happened. This tradition usually was done by the Men's Rally Committee, but in 1939, the Women's Rally Committee formed to take over because the men had to head off to war. They created card stunts on graph paper, as you can see in the screen. Yes, they would fill up every single square by hand. And then they would stamp directions, the direction cards for the students to know when to hold up the cards and which colored card to use during the game by putting directions on the cards when they would put them up on the bleachers by tacking them down. They would use typewriters to plan out the stunts. So as you can imagine, this was a very labor-intensive job. And after the men came back, the women kept doing the stunts, but the Men's Rally Committee did input their ideas, and the women would try to put them up, but the women did all the work for these stunts. The stunts would can vary from 50 times 50 cards and even 75 cards in the student section. These are very large stunts, as you can imagine. They would put the cards in paper bags and tag them down on the bleachers, since we had wooden bleachers back then. Then they would set up a standing stunt, which usually was a blue block C with a yellow background. And this is represented today by a permanent symbolism to the card stunts at the California Memorial Stadium. As you can see, the bleachers are all yellow at the student section, and they have a big blue C on represented there to memorialize the beginnings of the card stunts. These are some examples of the type of card stunts we would put up. Well, the women back then would put up. And they were all very different. They didn't have to be a specific thing, and they got really creative with them. This was another card stunt of Sailor Gate. And then the women got really, really ambitious later on, and they started having moving card stunts. So what this means is that they would set up instructions for people to like change colors of the cards depending on which section of the student section they were sitting on. And so that became really complicated because not everybody would turn their cards at the same time. And a really cool thing that the student section would do is they would wear white shirts to act as a white canvas to be able to really see those colors pop off at the games. And our students were super collaborative with us at that time. And one of the very famous examples of these moving stunts was the beer stain stunt. So here we're gonna have several pictures demonstrating how it would look as the cards would be turning. And the numbers represent like the director of card stunts at the time would yell the numbers, and being yelled, they would turn the cards. Okay, so after that, as I mentioned before, the people who were in charge of doing this, the main organizer would be the director of cards. In 1973, the Men's and Women's Rally Committee decided to join forces and become the official University of California Rally Committee, creating the position Director of Stunts. This position first started off and kicked off with Masaya Kubota and Andrea Lanzamafe, which, fun fact, ever since they were a paired Director of Stunts duo, there had not been a duo ever since 1983 until today, where Paulina and I take off and create history again by being a duo for the Director of Stunts position. So now we're gonna start off and continue the presentation.
All right, so talking about modern day card stunts and what do they look like now? So while there was a lot of variation with the card stunts back when the Women's Rally Committee was performing the stunts, we now have a standard size of about 50 by 50, which is within our student section. And we have 10 different colors that we can use in these stunts. So there's a lot of variation that we can create, a lot of really unique designs. As you can see here on the slide, this was one of the stunts where they actually showed Cal versus the opposing team and the opposing team's colors, which is really cool. So there are 5 cards that we use, and each of these cards has 2 colors on the front and the back. And so we will take these cards and make 50 bags of them, and then put those 50 bags into a bundle. And so we have 2,500 bags of cards by the time we're done, which amounts to 12,500 cards in total every single game for our stunt. So it is a very ambitious job to be able to put these stunts together. So the way that we get this done is actually through card sortings, which you can see happening here through the rally committee. So with our 12,000 cards, we have to put all of the cards into individual colors and then sort them into bags. Again, put those bags into bundles, make bundles of 50. And eventually we'll have to carry all these bundles from the north tunnel of the California Memorial Stadium, where we sort them, all the way to the student section. So that's one of our very fun game day jobs that the rally committee gets to take a part in. You will see when you go to these football games that the students have a habit of throwing the cards now. So after the card stunt happens, there is a very colorful parade of cards coming down, which we try our best to catch and collect. And we use 4 bands and a pallet of cards to store them while they're not being used in the stunts. So the way that we do these card stunt design now is much less laborious than having to hand draw them out like the Women's Rally Committee did back in the day on graph paper. We now use Adobe Photoshop with specific parameters, and so we're able to create these designs graphically, electronically first, and then we'll put those designs into a very special program which was made by our chair 4 or 5 years ago, which actually makes 2,500 instruction sheets for the students to have within their bags, so the students can reference this instruction sheet and also listen to the director of stunts when the stunt is happening to see what color they have to hold up next. And then they are sorted and put up with the regular stunts. And here's just an example of one of our old director Caroline's stunts with a little bear territory on it. So this is an example of what a full card stunt would look like for an entire game. As you can see, you'd start with an Oski and move on. I believe this game was versus the Sun Devils. So we have a lot of different transitions and really cool images that are different from one another that we progress through. And so how we actually set up the cards is through what we call a string crew. So we will come into the stadium 5 hours before kickoff to make sure we have ample time to put all these cards up because there are a lot of them. We will use string to first set up a skeleton of roughly how the stunt should look, so that all the rows are even, and then go every 5 rows and start working between those rows. And so members of the rally committee will come and volunteer because I don't think just one director of stunts could do all those cards by themselves. So it is a committee-wide activity. And as I said, we use string to really guide the way that the stunt is going to look. So we have a little picture here of one of our former director of traditions at one of our card sortings, and you can see right next to him is that string that we use for guidance. So a really cool event that happened in 2012 was when California Memorial Stadium was rededicated. We had a card stunt that stretched all the way around the stadium. It was 60,000 cards, an amazing sight to see, and we had to start a week in advance to really set this up. So here you can see part of what the stunt looked like. It was quite amazing. And then back in 2016, I believe, when we had our Super Bowl 50, our cow band actually performed at the Super Bowl. So if you can remember back, go on to the next slide, we were actually able to have our directors of card stunts go in and help out with this amazing card stunt that went all around the stadium. That was just a really cool part of card stunt history. And on to our next slide. And so during these COVID times, we have had to adapt a little bit because we can't be in the stadium anymore. But some of the ways that we've been finding different ways to do stunts include on Minecraft through our UC Blockly server. Here are some of the stunts that have been done in the past. We've also tried out doing alternative stunts in other locations on campus. So we are still doing card stunts, even though times are a little bit different right now. Okay, so we will start with our final round of trivia. Thank you for sticking with us through this presentation. This will be a card stunt trivia, so we hope that you will all join us for this very fun one.
Okay, so we are beginning. How many cards are put up on the bleachers for every? That is right. We put up 12,500 cards in bundles of 5 cards for 2,500 cards. What design was used for the first card stunt show? Yeah, so there were 2 answers, the Stanford Axe and the Block C. Where did the metallic cards used during previous football seasons came from? That is right. We permanently borrowed 17,000 cards from Stanford. The very first card stunts were seen at which sporting event? That is correct. Although most of our card stunts are now seen at a football game. Which of the following events had the largest card stunt show ever to set up by the director of stunts? That is great. At the 2016 Super Bowl with a whopping 68,000 cards, while the 2012 Memorial Stadium dedication ceremony was a really large one with 60,000 cards. When did the Women's Rally Committee take over the card stunts, making a primary? Indeed, it was 1939, and you could see on the screen our former Caroline Grover. One of the famous moving card stunts is designed to show a basketball player scoring. It is false. We have many famous moving stunts, but that is not one of them. When did the director of stunts need to be at the stadium to set up for a string crew? Yeah, 5 hours before kickoff, which means that if kickoff is at 11, we have to be there at 6 a.m. Which anniversary are the card stunts celebrating this year? Yes. So we're celebrating the 110th anniversary of card stunts since they started in 1910. The stunt that you saw right there was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Campanile. How many card colors are there? Yes, there are 10. We have 5 different cards, but they are dual-sided. Which design is permanently set by the color of the bleachers at the student section at Memorial Stadium? A blue block. Exactly. Where do card sortings usually happen? the Memorial Stadium tunnel? Since the women's and men's rally committees combined in 1973, how many directors of card stunts have there been? There have been 49. As you can remember, the first two starting off, and then Paulina and I are the only dual card stunts directors. How many cards were used for the 2012 stadium-wide stunt? Yes, 60,000 cards. You can imagine that took a time. For our last question, what virtual platform have this year's Director of Stunts adopted? We have adopted Minecraft, but also accepting UC Blockly, since that is the place we set up the stunts. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And for the winners, we have ARM77, Andy N, and Catherine M. Congratulations. Please take a screenshot of your winning screen, and we will let you know how you can contact us right now. So, how do you claim your prize? If you won, please submit your screenshot with your address, whichever address you want to use, either your like home address or a PO box at ucrc.stunts@gmail.com. I recommend you screenshotting the screen right now so you know which prizes you might get, especially for the second place prize that you can choose from one of those 3 prizes. Congratulations, everyone. So we want to thank you to everybody who made this presentation possible. UDAR, the University of California staff and faculty, the ASUC, Michael LaGrande, Casey Cox, John Corwin, the Aussie Committee, and the UC Raleigh Committee. Thank you, everyone, for coming, listening to us, and participating in today's trivia show. I hope you all had a bunch of fun. Okay, so I'm gonna end. Oh, if you want to say anything, Mark or Paulina, you're welcome to.
Yeah, thank you all for coming out tonight. Hope you all had a lot of fun playing trivia and learning a little bit more about UC Berkeley.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming. We really enjoyed having you all here to share with us. And thank you so much.